The rain had been relentless for hours, turning the dirt road into a slick ribbon of mud that swallowed Emma Davis's worn boots with every step. Her breath came in shallow gasps, each one heavy with the weight of the life growing inside her. The sky was a bruised purple, thick with storm clouds that threatened to burst again at any moment. Emma's hand instinctively pressed against her swollen belly as she scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of shelter. The landscape stretched wide and empty, dotted with skeletal trees and the faint outline of hills shrouded in mist. The cold seeped through her threadbare jacket, but it was the gnawing uncertainty of what lay ahead that truly chilled her. Her legs trembled with exhaustion, the pregnancy making every step a small battle. The road had led her here, to this forgotten stretch of countryside, far from the distant hum of the city she had fled. Her fingers curled tightly around the strap of her battered backpack, the only possession she had left after the eviction notice had been served weeks ago. The weight of abandonment pressed down on her. The loss of her job, the empty apartment she had been forced to leave, and Mark's final words echoing in her mind as he packed his bags for Seattle, leaving her to face everything alone. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. The farmhouse appeared suddenly, almost like a mirage through the sheets of rain. Its silhouette was jagged against the fading light, a relic from another time with peeling paint and windows clouded by decades of dust. The porch sagged under the weight of neglect, and the front door hung slightly ajar, as if inviting her in, or daring her to enter. Emma hesitated for a heartbeat, then took a shaky breath and stepped forward, driven by a desperate need for refuge. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of damp wood and forgotten memories. The floorboards creaked beneath her feet as she moved cautiously through the dim interior, the faint glow of a lantern she had found flickering weakly against the walls. Dust motes danced in the stale air, disturbed by her presence. The main room was empty save for a tattered armchair and a fireplace choked with ashes, long cold. Emma's eyes swept across the cracked plaster and faded wallpaper, tracing the outlines of a life once lived here. Despite the decay, a fragile sense of shelter wrapped around her, a fragile promise amid the storm. She sank to her knees beside the hearth, her palms pressed against the cool floor as she fought to steady her racing heart. The storm howled outside. But here, in this moment, the farmhouse felt like a fragile lifeline. Her mind drifted back to the weeks before, the relentless march of misfortune that had driven her from the city's suffocating streets. Losing her job at the publishing house had been the first blow, a casualty of a sudden bankruptcy that left her scrambling. Then Mark's departure, the silence that followed, and the eviction notice that made it clear she couldn't stay in the temporary shelter any longer. Emma closed her eyes, letting the memories wash over her like a bitter tide. She remembered the nights spent curled on a threadbare mattress in a cramped, crowded room, the whispered arguments between strangers, the cold that seeped into her bones. With every hardship, the life inside her had grown, a small flicker of hope amid the turmoil. But now, as her due date loomed closer, that hope felt fragile, like the crumbling walls around her. The farmhouse groaned as the wind rattled the windows, and Emma's gaze fell on a corner of the room where a small, locked chest sat half hidden beneath a threadbare quilt. Her curiosity stirred, but fatigue weighed heavily on her. She needed rest, a moment to gather strength before facing whatever lay ahead. Still, the chest called to her, a silent invitation to uncover the stories buried beneath layers of dust and time. Outside, the storm began to abate, the rain softening to a gentle patter against the roof. Emma settled against the wall, her breath slow and steady as exhaustion claimed her. The farmhouse, with all its flaws and shadows, had become her sanctuary, a refuge from the relentless storm both outside and within. In the quiet, she allowed herself a moment to hope that perhaps this forgotten place held something more than shelter. Maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of a new chapter. As twilight deepened, Emma's thoughts wandered to the unborn child she carried, a life as uncertain as her own. The road ahead was shrouded in doubt, but here, in this fragile refuge, she found a flicker of strength. The farmhouse stood silent and waiting, its secrets hidden in the shadows, ready to reveal themselves in time. For now, Emma closed her eyes and let the storm outside lull her into a restless sleep, bracing herself for the journey yet to come. The dim light of dawn seeped through the cracked window panes, casting muted patterns across the worn wooden floor. Emma stirred, her body aching from the restless sleep, her hand instinctively brushing her belly as if seeking reassurance from the life within. The farmhouse greeted her with a heavy silence, broken only by the creak of settling wood and the distant call of a crow. She rose slowly, every movement deliberate and careful, the weight of her pregnancy making even the simplest tasks a challenge. Her eyes fell again on the small chest tucked away in the corner, its dark wood dulled by decades of dust and neglect. The lock, rusted but intact, hinted at secrets waiting just beyond reach. The morning light revealed faded carvings along the chest's edges, delicate vines and flowers intertwined in a pattern that spoke of care and craftsmanship long forgotten. Emma's curiosity stirred anew, the desire to uncover a story hidden beneath layers of time, pressing gently at the edges of her weary resolve. She circled the room, searching for something to aid in opening the chest. Her fingers found a loose nail protruding from the floorboard, and with cautious effort she pried it free. The lock resisted at first, groaning with age, but a few determined tugs later, the chest creaked open. Inside lay a collection of yellowed papers, fragile with age, and a small bundle tied with a faded ribbon. Emma's breath caught as she lifted the bundle, the scent of old paper and something faintly floral drifting upward. Pulling out one of the letters, she unfolded it carefully, her eyes tracing the elegant script penned in ink that had softened to sepia. The words spoke of daily struggles and fleeting moments of joy, a life lived in quiet perseverance. The letters were addressed to someone named Margaret, a woman whose voice emerged from the past with surprising clarity. Emma felt an unexpected kinship as she read about Margaret's hopes and fears, her longing for stability amid hardship, and the small triumphs that sustained her through difficult days. Emma sank back into the armchair, the letters spread across her lap, the chest forgotten for the moment. The farmhouse seemed to hold its breath around her, the walls whispering echoes of lives once lived within. Her mind drifted back to the present, to the uncertainty that loomed like a shadow over her own future. The pregnancy, once a source of quiet hope, now felt fragile beneath the weight of abandonment and fear. Memories flickered through her mind, nights spent pacing cramped apartments, the sting of rejection, the ache of isolation. She thought of Mark's absence, his final words heavy with indifference, and the eviction notice that had forced her into this uncertain refuge. The contrast between her past and this silent house was stark. Yet something in the farmhouse's stillness offered a strange comfort. Emma's fingers brushed over the bundle tied with ribbon, her heart quickening with a mix of anticipation and hesitation. Inside was a small journal, its leather cover cracked and softened by time. She opened it carefully, the pages brittle but filled with neat handwriting that mirrored the letters she had just read. The journal belonged to Margaret, whose words unfolded like a lifeline across the years. As she read, Margaret's story came alive. Tales of hardship during harsh winters, the struggles of raising a child alone, and the quiet moments of hope that kept her moving forward. Emma felt the weight of those experiences settle over her, a shared burden that transcended time. The farmhouse was no longer just a shelter. It had become a repository of resilience, a testament to women who had faced adversity and survived. The hours slipped by unnoticed as Emma immersed herself in the past, the connection to Margaret's life weaving through the fabric of her own. The farmhouse seemed to breathe with her discovery, the shadows retreating as the morning sun climbed higher in the sky. Outside, the storm had passed entirely, replaced by a pale blue sky and the soft rustle of leaves in a gentle breeze. Yet beneath the surface of this newfound refuge, Emma's anxiety lingered. The questions that haunted her mind refused to be silenced. The uncertainty of what lay ahead, the fear of losing this fragile sanctuary, and the burden of preparing for a child in a world that had offered so little kindness. The farmhouse's secrets were a balm, but they could not erase the pressing reality of her situation. She stood, stretching stiff limbs, and moved toward the small kitchen area, her steps slow but determined. The room was bare, save for a cracked sink and a rusted stove that looked as though it hadn't been used in years. Emma's gaze swept over the space, imagining it filled with warmth and life, the sounds of a child's laughter mingling with the creak of the old house. The vision was fragile, yet it sparked a flicker of hope amid the uncertainty. Emma returned to the main room, her fingers tracing the edges of the letters and journal as she gathered them carefully. The chest remained open, an invitation to delve deeper into the past, to uncover the stories tucked away beneath years of dust and silence. She knew that exploring these remnants was more than a distraction. It was a way to anchor herself, to find strength in the resilience of those who had come before her. As afternoon light filtered through the cracked windows, shadows lengthened across the floorboards. Emma paused by the front door, listening to the distant sounds of the countryside, the call of birds, the rustle of wind through the trees. For a brief moment, the farmhouse felt less like a relic and more like a home, a place where she could begin to rebuild what had been lost. Her thoughts drifted again to the weeks before. Moments of fear and loneliness, the cold nights spent wrapped in borrowed blankets, the sting of rejection that had marked every interaction. Yet here, within these weathered walls, there was a chance for something different. The farmhouse held stories of endurance and hope, and Emma was beginning to see her own story woven into that tapestry. The small chest, the letters, and the journal were more than artifacts. They were a bridge to a past that offered lessons in survival and courage. Emma felt a quiet determination settle within her, a resolve to face the uncertain road ahead with the strength drawn from those who had weathered storms before her. As evening approached, the farmhouse glowed softly in the fading light, its shadows deepening, yet somehow less foreboding. Emma arranged the letters and journal carefully on the table, a small island of connection amid the silence. She pressed her hand once more to her belly, feeling the gentle flutter of movement from within, a reminder of the new life she carried. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the promise of change. Emma knew the path forward would be difficult, fraught with unknowns. But for now, in this quiet moment, she allowed herself to believe in the fragile hope the farmhouse had ignited. The past and present had converged in this forgotten place, setting the stage for a journey that was only just beginning. The farmhouse seemed to hold its breath as Emma moved through its shadowed rooms, the afternoon sun casting long, golden beams that illuminated layers of dust and decay. Her fingers traced the edges of a faded photograph resting atop a pile of scattered letters on the weathered table. The image was sepia-toned and fragile, a woman with a tired but resolute gaze cradling a newborn baby wrapped in a threadbare blanket. The worn inscription on the back read simply, "Margaret and Little Ruth, 1947. Emma's heart tightened as she held the photograph, the silent connection bridging decades between her own uncertain future and the lives once lived within these walls. The farmhouse had become more than a refuge. It was a vessel of stories etched into time, each artifact a fragment of a life marked by struggle and quiet endurance. As she settled back into the armchair, the journal lay open in her lap, its pages revealing more of Margaret's intimate thoughts. Margaret's words painted a vivid picture of a woman navigating hardship with fierce determination. She wrote of long, cold nights spent rocking her baby to sleep by the flickering light of a kerosene lamp, of days filled with hard labor in the fields and the constant worry about providing enough food and warmth. The entries spoke of fear of poverty, of loneliness, of an uncertain future, but also of hope, a stubborn light that refused to be extinguished. Emma felt a kinship with Margaret that transcended time. Both women faced the daunting challenge of carrying new life into a world that seemed indifferent, even cruel. Yet Margaret's story offered a quiet reassurance, a whispered promise that resilience could carve a path through despair. Lost in the fragile narrative, Emma barely noticed the soft knock at the door until a tentative voice called her name. Startled, she rose slowly, her hand instinctively resting on her belly. The door creaked open, revealing a man in worn work clothes and a weathered hat, his face kind but cautious. "Hi there," he said gently. "I'm Tom. I live down the road. I saw the light in the window and thought I'd check if you're all right." Emma hesitated, then nodded, stepping aside to let him in. The farmhouse seemed to hold its breath again, the sudden presence filling the space with uncertainty and possibility. Tom's eyes took in the worn surroundings with a mixture of concern and understanding. "I know this place," he said, his voice low. "It's been empty for years, but it means a lot to folks around here. A lot of history and a lot of stories tied to it." Emma gestured toward the letters and photograph. "I've been finding some of those stories," she said softly. "A woman named Margaret. She lived here long ago. Her journal is full of her struggles and hopes." Tom nodded, settling into the armchair opposite her. Margaret was a tough woman. Raised her daughter here on her own when times were hard. The farmhouse was her sanctuary, just like it is for you now. The weight of his words settled over Emma. She found herself opening up about the months that had led her here, the job loss, Mark's departure, the eviction, and the mounting fear as her due date approached. Tom listened without interruption, his gaze steady and empathetic. "There's more than just history tied to this place," he said finally. "There's been talk lately about developers wanting to buy up the land. They see it as prime property for new housing or commercial projects. Folks around here have been trying to protect it, but without clear ownership, it's hard to fight." Emma's heart sank at the news. The fragile refuge she had found might not be hers to keep. The farmhouse, with its stories and memories, hung in the balance, threatened by forces beyond her control. "But why fight for it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Tom's eyes gleamed with quiet pride. because it's more than just a building. It's a symbol of resilience, of people who faced impossible odds and still held on. It's part of the community's heart. Emma glanced around the room, imagining the countless lives that had passed through these walls, each leaving behind a trace of strength and hope. The farmhouse was a beacon, a testament to the endurance of those who refused to be broken. As the afternoon light waned, Emma felt a surge of determination. She was no longer alone in this fight. With Tom's presence, the stories of Margaret, and the fragile hope growing inside her, the farmhouse had become a lifeline. A chance to build something lasting from the fragments of a broken past. Before Tom left, he handed her a folded piece of paper, a map of the surrounding land, marked with notes about property boundaries and local landmarks. If you want, I can help you navigate the paperwork. There might be a way to claim some rights here, especially if you find something that ties you to this place. Emma accepted the map with trembling hands, the weight of possibility settling over her. The journey ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges and threats. But for the first time in months, she felt a flicker of hope. As Tom stepped outside, the fading light caught the edges of the porch, casting long shadows that stretched into the gathering dusk. Emma closed the door behind him, her fingers lingering on the latch as she looked once more at the photograph of Margaret and her child. The farmhouse no longer felt like an empty shell, but a bridge between past and present. A place where stories, intertwined and new chapters awaited. Emma sat back down, the journal open before her, and allowed herself to imagine a future where she, too, would be part of the legacy this place held. Outside, the wind whispered softly through the trees, carrying with it the promise of change and the murmur of voices long silenced. Inside, Emma's resolve grew stronger, fueled by the connection to a woman she had never met, but whose courage now lit a path forward. The soft morning light filtered through the cracked window panes, casting gentle shadows across the faded wallpaper of the farmhouse's main room. Emma sat by the worn wooden table, the journal open before her, its pages whispering stories of a life shaped by struggle and quiet endurance. Her fingers traced the delicate script as she read Margaret's words, each entry a window into a past both distant and intimately familiar. Margaret wrote of the biting cold of winter nights, when the wind howled through the cracks in the walls and the fire was barely enough to keep the shivering child wrapped in her arms, warm. She detailed the endless days spent tending to the small garden, the aching back from carrying water from the well, and the constant worry that the meager harvest wouldn't be enough to sustain them through lean times. Yet, beneath the surface of hardship, there was a thread of hope, a determination that refused to be extinguished. Emma's gaze fell on a faded photograph pinned to the page, its edges worn and curling. It showed Margaret standing outside the farmhouse, her face lined with both fatigue and fierce pride, holding a newborn swaddled tightly against her chest. The child's eyes, wide and curious, seemed to look straight into Emma's soul. The image stirred something deep within her, a fragile hope that life could endure, even flourish, despite the odds. As she read, Emma felt the weight of her own fears and uncertainties lift slightly, carried away on the wings of Margaret's resilience. The parallels between their lives were striking. Two women separated by decades, yet bound by the shared experience of bringing new life into a world that offered no guarantees. Margaret's story became a mirror, reflecting not just struggle, but the strength to persevere. The farmhouse, with its peeling paint and creaking floors, had once been a sanctuary for a woman like Margaret. A place where she could face the storm outside and the storms within with quiet courage. Emma traced the words that spoke of late-night prayers whispered into the darkness, of small victories celebrated in the warmth of a fire, and of dreams held tightly against the harsh realities of the day. Lost in the pages, Emma hardly noticed the knock at the door until a soft voice called her name. She looked up to see Tom standing hesitantly in the doorway, a weathered envelope clutched in his hand. His eyes held a mixture of concern and determination as he stepped inside. "I thought you might want to see this," he said, handing her the envelope. "It came in the mail this morning. Someone from the town office said it might help with the farmhouse." Emma's fingers trembled as she opened the envelope, unfolding the documents inside. They were old deeds and legal papers, faded with age but still legible. Among them was a deed bearing the name Margaret Harlan, the woman whose story had become so entwined with Emma's own. Tom watched as Emma's eyes scanned the papers, the realization dawning slowly. "This could mean the farmhouse belongs to you," he said quietly. "If you can prove your connection, it might give you the legal standing to protect it." The possibility sent a surge of hope and fear coursing through Emma's veins. The fight to keep the farmhouse was no longer just about shelter. It was about preserving a legacy, honoring the resilience of the women who had come before her, and carving out a future for the child she carried within. Over the next days, Emma and Tom pored over the documents, piecing together a history that linked her to Margaret's family. Each discovery strengthened her resolve, transforming the farmhouse from a mere refuge into a home with roots that reached deep into the soil beneath her feet. The town's history came alive through the faded photographs, letters, and journals tucked away in dusty corners. Emma learned of the community that had once rallied around Margaret, offering support in times of need, and the traditions that had sustained generations through hardship. The farmhouse was more than wood and stone. It was a testament to endurance and hope. Emma's growing connection to the farmhouse infused her with new strength. She began to imagine a life where her child would grow surrounded by stories of courage and love, where the echoes of the past could guide them through the uncertainties ahead. Each evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emma sat by the firelight, reading Margaret's journal aloud to the silent walls. The words carried a soothing rhythm, weaving a tapestry of resilience that wrapped around her like a warm blanket. The farmhouse, once a symbol of abandonment, was becoming a beacon of hope. Yet, beneath the calm surface, the threat of losing the farmhouse loomed. The developers' intentions were whispered in the town's corridors, their plans a shadow that stretched over the fragile sanctuary. Emma knew the fight would not be easy, but Margaret's story reminded her that courage often flourished in the face of adversity. With Tom's steadfast support, Emma began reaching out to neighbors and local historians, seeking allies who valued the farmhouse's heritage. The community's memories and shared history became a source of strength, a collective voice rising to safeguard the legacy embedded in the land. As winter's chill crept closer, Emma prepared the farmhouse for the coming months. She repaired windows to keep out the cold, cleared the garden of debris, and filled the shelves with the small comforts she could manage. The house responded to her care, its walls seeming to hold a quiet gratitude, sheltering her as she nurtured the life within. The days grew shorter, but Emma's resolve only deepened. Each new discovery from Margaret's journal added a layer of meaning to her journey, a reminder that the past was never truly gone. It lived on in the hearts of those who dared to remember. One evening, as snow began to dust the fields beyond the farmhouse, Emma sat by the window, her hand resting on her belly. The flicker of the fireplace cast dancing shadows, and in that warm glow, she felt a profound connection to the women whose stories had carried her this far. Margaret's words echoed softly in her mind, a promise of hope and resilience passed down through generations. Emma's breath mingled with the cold air on the pane as she whispered a silent vow to protect this place, to honor the legacy, and to build a future where her child would know the strength of those who came before. The farmhouse, once a forgotten relic, now stood as a testament to survival and new beginnings. Within its walls, Emma found not just shelter, but a home, a place where the past and present converged, and where hope could take root and grow. The morning sun filtered softly through the frost-laced window panes, casting a pale glow across the farmhouse's worn wooden floors. Emma wrapped a blanket tighter around her shoulders as she stepped outside, the crisp air biting at her cheeks but clearing her thoughts. The fields stretched out before her, their edges blurred by the thin veil of mist lingering over the land. It was a quiet morning. Yet beneath the stillness, the weight of looming challenges pressed heavily on her mind. Her footsteps crunched softly on the frost-hardened earth as she made her way toward the small cluster of buildings that marked the edge of the nearby town. The path was familiar now, etched into her routine as she sought connection beyond the solitude of the farmhouse. Today, her purpose was clear: to find support, to weave herself into the fabric of the community that had long held the farmhouse's legacy. The town was modest. Weathered storefronts with peeling paint, a handful of locals moving through their morning rituals, nodding greetings that hinted at cautious friendliness. Emma's heart quickened as she approached the general store, its windows fogged with warmth and the scent of fresh bread. Inside, the murmur of conversation softened as she stepped through the door, the bell above chiming gently. Tom stood behind the counter, his face breaking into a warm smile when he saw her. "Morning, Emma," he said, his tone easy but serious. "I was just talking with some folks about the farmhouse." Emma nodded, feeling a flicker of hope. "I wanted to learn more about the history and what threats it might be facing." Tom leaned in, lowering his voice. "There's been talk of developers circling the area. They've got their eyes on the land, see the potential for new housing developments. The farmhouse and the surrounding fields are prime targets." Emma's stomach tightened. The fragile refuge she'd found, the connection to Margaret's story and the community's heritage, was under threat. But the concern in Tom's eyes wasn't the only thing that stirred her resolve. It was the quiet determination of the town's people, those who still remembered and valued what the farmhouse represented. As the morning wore on, Emma found herself drawn into conversations with locals, farmers, shopkeepers, and elders who shared stories of the farmhouse's past. They spoke of Margaret and her daughter Ruth, of community gatherings held on the weathered porch, and the years when the land had been a source of sustenance and solidarity. Each tale wove a richer tapestry of meaning, binding Emma more tightly to the place she now called home. In the town square, she met Mrs. Harlan, an elderly woman with silver hair and eyes sharp as winter frost. There was a resemblance in the set of her jaw, the curve of her smile. And as Emma introduced herself, the woman's gaze softened. "You must be connected to Margaret," Mrs. Harlan said quietly, her voice tinged with nostalgia. "She was a brave woman. This farmhouse was her sanctuary, and it's good to see someone honoring that legacy." Emma felt a swell of emotion, the weight of history settling comfortably on her shoulders. "I want to protect it, for my child, and for the women who came before me." Mrs. Harlan nodded. "You're not alone. We've been fighting to preserve this place, but without clear ownership, it's difficult. The developers have money and lawyers. We need a strong voice." Encouraged by their support, Emma spent the afternoon with Tom visiting the local library and town hall, gathering records and documents that might strengthen her claim. The legal tangle surrounding the farmhouse was complex, a patchwork of old deeds, forgotten wills, and disputed boundaries. But with each piece uncovered, the picture grew clearer and her determination deepened. As evening fell, Emma returned to the farmhouse, the weight of the day pressing upon her, but tempered by a growing sense of purpose. The warm glow of the fire welcomed her back, the familiar creaks and sighs of the old house a comforting embrace. She placed the documents carefully on the table, their edges worn but promising. The farmhouse, with its peeling paint and time-worn floors, was no longer just a shelter from the storm. It was a symbol of resilience, a beacon for those who believed in preserving history and community. Emma felt the threads of connection weaving tighter, binding her story to those who had come before and those who would follow. But as the night deepened, so did the shadows of uncertainty. The developers' intentions were clear, and the pressure was mounting. Emma knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, legal battles, community tensions, and the personal trials of preparing for motherhood in a precarious situation. Yet, beneath the weight of it all, a quiet strength took root. The farmhouse had stood through storms of all kinds, weather, neglect, and the march of time. Now, it was Emma's turn to stand firm, to protect the home and the legacy it held. As she settled into bed, the farmhouse around her settling into its nocturnal rhythm, Emma pressed her hand to her belly, feeling the gentle flutter of life within. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in months, she allowed herself a flicker of hope that with the help of a community bound by history and heart, she could face whatever came next. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the promise of change and the steadfast murmur of voices united in defense of a fragile sanctuary. The farmhouse stood silent but resolute, a testament to endurance and the power of connection in the face of adversity. The first frost had settled deep into the earth, frosting the farmhouse's weathered roof and tinting the surrounding fields with a delicate sheen of white. Inside, Emma moved with quiet purpose, her breaths measured as she balanced the weight of her growing belly and the mounting responsibilities pressing in from all sides. The farmhouse, once a silent witness to forgotten days, was now alive with the stirrings of renewed determination and the promise of preservation. Days blurred into each other as Emma immersed herself in the tangled web of deeds, wills, and letters that might secure her claim to the farmhouse. The documents were fragile, some nearly illegible from time's relentless erosion, but each discovery was a thread pulling her closer to the truth. Among Margaret's belongings, she found a faded deed tucked inside the journal's final pages, a legal paper that hinted at ownership rights, a lifeline amid the complex history of the land. With Tom's steady support, Emma reached out to the townspeople who remembered the farmhouse's legacy, gathering signatures for petitions and rallying voices eager to protect their shared heritage. The small community came together, their collective memory and hope intertwining with Emma's resolve. Neighbors brought food and firewood. Local artisans offered their skills to repair broken windows and reinforce the porch. The farmhouse was slowly transforming from a place of neglect into a home filled with purpose and care. Yet, not all welcomed this revival. The developers loomed like a shadow over the town, their interest in the property no secret. Letters from lawyers arrived, terse and threatening, warning of legal action if Emma did not vacate the premises. Rumors stirred in the town, whispers of bribes, pressure, and promises made behind closed doors. The tension thickened, casting a pall over the fragile peace Emma had begun to find. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant hills, Emma met with a group of local residents in the farmhouse's main room. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering light on determined faces gathered around the worn table. Plans were laid out to contest the developer's claims, to bring the fight to the courts and the community alike. Emma listened, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and fierce hope. Among the group was Mrs. Harlan, her voice steady as she recounted stories of past battles fought to preserve the town's heritage. "This farmhouse isn't just wood and stone," she said, her eyes shining with conviction. "It's a symbol of who we are. If we lose it, we lose a part of ourselves." Emma nodded, feeling the weight of their shared purpose settle over her. The fight was no longer hers alone. It belonged to everyone who valued the history and heart embedded in this land. The farmhouse had become a beacon, drawing strength from the community's collective spirit. In the days that followed, Emma faced intimidation. Strange noises outside at night, a broken window left unrepaired. A note slipped under the door with a thinly veiled warning. But with each challenge, her resolve only deepened. The farmhouse was her sanctuary, a testament to the resilience she found mirrored in Margaret's words and the faces of those who stood beside her. Tom remained a steadfast ally, his practical knowledge and quiet strength providing a grounding force amid the turmoil. Together, they organized meetings, reached out to local officials, and prepared to present their case. Emma's growing belly was a constant reminder of what was at stake. Not just the farmhouse, but the future for the life she carried. As winter tightened its grip, the farmhouse glowed with the warmth of firelight and community. Rooms once dark and cold now held the promise of life and renewal. Emma found solace in small routines, mending curtains, tending to the garden's hardy winter greens, reading Margaret's journal aloud by candlelight. The past and present intertwined, weaving a tapestry of hope and determination. One afternoon, while sorting through a trunk filled with Margaret's belongings, Emma discovered a hidden envelope. Inside was a letter addressed to her great-granddaughter, words of encouragement and love, a blessing passed down through generations. The letter spoke of strength in adversity, the power of roots, and the importance of holding fast to one's heritage. Emma's eyes filled with tears as she read the words, feeling the presence of those who had come before her, strengthening the resolve within. The farmhouse was more than a shelter. It was a lineage, a legacy of women who had faced hardship and chosen to endure. The legal battle loomed ahead, but Emma no longer felt alone or powerless. With the community's support, the echoes of Margaret's courage, and the life growing inside her, she stood ready to face whatever challenges awaited. As night fell over the farmhouse, the wind whispered through the bare branches outside, carrying with it the promise of resilience and renewal. Emma sat by the fire, her hand resting gently on her belly, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. The farmhouse, once a forgotten relic, now pulsed with the heartbeat of a new beginning. One forged through strength, solidarity, and the unyielding hope of a mother preparing to welcome life into a world she was determined to protect. The chill of early winter pressed against the farmhouse windows, frosting the edges of the glass with delicate patterns that caught the weak afternoon light. Inside, Emma moved carefully through the rooms, each step measured against the growing weight of her belly. The once silent house now hummed with quiet activity, boards being nailed, windows sealed, and the steady crackle of firewood burning in the hearth. The restoration was more than physical. It was a reclaiming of hope, a preparation for the life she was soon to bring into the world. Yet, beneath the surface of this fragile renewal, The pressure mounted. The developer's shadow loomed larger each day, their tactics growing more aggressive. Late at night, Emma heard the scrape of footsteps outside, the flicker of a flashlight through slats in the boarded-up windows. A shattered pane in the back room spoke of a warning, a message meant to unnerve. But Emma refused to yield to fear. Instead, she drew strength from the community rallying around her, their voices a shield against the encroaching darkness. Tom was a constant presence, his hands steady as he repaired broken shutters and reinforced doors. His quiet encouragement was a balm to Emma's frayed nerves. "They can try to scare us," he said one evening as they sat by the fire. "But they won't break this place, or you." Emma nodded, the firelight casting shadows across her determined face. Inside, she felt the flutter of movement from the baby, a small, fierce reminder of why she fought so hard. Preparing for motherhood in the midst of uncertainty was daunting, but it was also a source of profound strength. The farmhouse's transformation was slow, but tangible. Emma gathered soft blankets and second-hand clothes, setting up a small corner by the window as a nursery. She arranged the worn rocking chair that had belonged to Margaret, imagining the generations of mothers who had sat there before her. The space, once cold and empty, began to breathe warmth and promise. Despite the growing sense of home, the external pressures refused to relent. Legal notices arrived with increasing frequency, demanding eviction and threatening court action. Emma met each challenge with quiet resolve, consulting with Tom and a local legal aid volunteer who had offered assistance after hearing her story. The fight was exhausting, but the possibility of losing the farmhouse and the legacy it represented was unthinkable. One afternoon, as snow began to dust the ground outside, Emma received a visit from Mrs. Harlan and several neighbors. They brought casseroles, firewood, and offers of help. Their presence filled the farmhouse with life and solidarity. Around the worn dining table, plans were made to petition the town council and organize community events to raise awareness and support. Emma found solace in these moments, the shared hope strengthening her resolve. The farmhouse was no longer just her refuge. It was a symbol of collective endurance, a testament to the power of community standing together against forces that sought to erase history and displace lives. As the days shortened and winter deepened, Emma's body grew heavier, her movements slower but more purposeful. She spent evenings reading aloud from Margaret's journal, the familiar words a soothing rhythm that connected past and present. The voices of women long gone seemed to whisper encouragement through the creaking walls. Preparing for the baby became an act of defiance, a declaration that life would flourish despite the odds. Emma sewed small clothes by hand, her fingers deft despite the chill in the room. She arranged the nursery with care, placing a worn doll in the cradle, a gift from a neighbor who had once been a midwife. The tension outside the farmhouse simmered, but did not boil over. Emma knew the fight was far from over, but with each passing day, her confidence grew. She was no longer just a woman seeking shelter. She was a guardian of a legacy, a mother-to-be ready to nurture new life in a place steeped in history and hope. One cold evening, as the wind howled softly outside, Emma sat by the fire, her hand resting gently on her belly. The farmhouse, weathered but resilient, seemed to pulse with quiet strength. She closed her eyes, feeling the steady beat of her child's heart, and whispered a promise: to protect this home, to honor the past, and to embrace the future with courage. The storm outside raged, but within these walls, a new chapter was unfolding, one of resilience love, and the unbroken bond between generations of women who had faced hardship and chosen to endure. Emma breathed deeply, ready to meet whatever challenges lay ahead, fortified by the strength of those who had come before and the life she carried within. The storm had arrived with a sudden fury, dark clouds rolling across the sky as wind whipped through the barren trees surrounding the farmhouse. Rain lashed against the windows, and the old house groaned beneath the weight of the tempest. Inside, Emma gripped the edge of the kitchen table, her breath shallow but steady, as contractions rippled through her body. The time had come. The farmhouse, once silent and forgotten, now pulsed with urgency and life. Tom was by her side, his face pale but resolute, as he helped her move carefully toward the small makeshift nursery. The fire in the hearth flickered, casting long shadows that danced on the peeling wallpaper, echoing the flicker of hope burning fiercely within Emma's heart. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the worn photograph of Margaret and her newborn hanging on the wall. A silent witness to the unbroken line of women who had faced storms, both literal and metaphorical. Emma's fingers brushed the frame as a contraction tightened around her, a reminder that she was part of something larger than herself, connected through time by courage and resilience. The storm raged outside, but within the farmhouse walls, a community gathered. Neighbors had braved the tempest to stand guard, their presence a shield against the threats looming beyond the property line. Voices carried in soft murmurs, offering encouragement and strength as Emma labored. The house filled with a shared sense of purpose and hope. Legal battles and developer threats faded into the background, eclipsed by the primal, timeless act of bringing new life into the world. Emma's breaths came in measured waves, Tom's hands steady as he offered whispered reassurances. The farmhouse, with all its scars and stories, held her close, a sanctuary forged from years of struggle and love. As the night deepened, the storm's fury began to wane, the howling wind giving way to a steady rain. Emma's cries softened into quiet gasps, and finally, amidst the flickering candlelight, a newborn's first wail pierced the silence. The baby's cry was a beacon, a declaration of survival and hope. Tom wrapped the child gently in a soft blanket, his eyes reflecting the tears and triumph of the moment. Emma reached out, her trembling hands cradling the fragile new life against her chest. The warmth of the baby's skin, the steady rise and fall of breath, filled the room with a profound sense of peace. Outside, the community rallied, their whispered prayers and quiet songs weaving through the night air. The farmhouse stood firm against the storm, a symbol of endurance and new beginnings. Emma's gaze drifted to the window, where the first light of dawn touched the horizon, promising a day shaped by resilience and love. In the days that followed, the farmhouse became a haven not only for Emma and her child, but for the community that had come together in their shared fight. The birth was a turning point, a living testament to the strength rooted in history and the power of unity. Emma named her daughter Elena, a name passed down through generations, carrying with it the hopes and dreams of women who had faced hardship and emerged stronger. As she held Elena close, Emma felt the weight of the past and the promise of the future intertwine, a delicate balance of memory and possibility. The farmhouse, once threatened by loss and neglect, was now alive with laughter and light. The community's efforts to protect it gained momentum, fueled by the new life that had blossomed within its walls. Emma's resolve, strengthened by motherhood and the support around her, became a beacon for others facing their own battles. As the sun rose higher, casting golden light over the frost-kissed fields, Emma stood on the porch, Elena nestled against her chest. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of earth and renewal. The farmhouse, weathered but unbroken, stood as a testament to the enduring spirit of those who called it home. The storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape washed clean and ready for new growth. Emma's journey was far from over, but in this moment, surrounded by the echoes of the past and the promise of the future, she found a profound sense of belonging. The unbroken line of Thornfield women continued, with Emma and Elena embodying the resilience and strength that had defined their lineage for generations. As she gazed out at the moonlit grounds, Emma felt a quiet certainty. They were finally home. The soft light of dawn crept through the frost-kissed window panes, spilling pale gold across the farmhouse's worn floors. Emma sat at the kitchen table, Elena nestled against her chest, the baby's gentle breaths a steady rhythm beneath her palm. Outside, the world was awakening, the chill of early morning softened by the promise of a new day. But within the quiet warmth of the farmhouse, a different kind of awakening was unfolding, one of truth, revelation, and the hard-won victory that had finally come to light. Weeks after the birth, Emma found herself poring over a stack of legal documents spread across the kitchen table. The papers were dense and official. Deeds, affidavits, and court rulings that bore the weight of justice and history intertwined. Among them was a recently uncovered will, hidden for decades within a forgotten safe deposit box in the town archives. It was a document that would change everything. The will, penned by Emma's great-grandfather, explicitly protected the farmhouse and its surrounding lands from any form of development or sale to outside interests. It was a guardian of legacy, a legal shield that had remained dormant but powerful, waiting for the rightful heir to claim it. The discovery was a turning point, a tangible proof that the farmhouse was not just a relic, but a rightful home, and Emma, its rightful owner. Tom sat nearby, his expression a mix of relief and quiet triumph. "This changes the game," he said softly, eyes flicking over the documents. "With this, the developers don't stand a chance." Emma nodded, a wave of exhaustion and exhilaration washing over her. The months of struggle, the late nights, the threats, the battles in court, were suddenly infused with new hope. The farmhouse, the stories held within its walls, and the child she cradled were no longer at risk of being torn away by greed and indifference. Word of the discovery spread through the community like wildfire. Neighbors and allies rallied around Emma, their support solidifying into a movement to preserve the farmhouse as a protected historical site. The town's council convened, voices raised in defense of the legacy embedded in the weathered beams and worn floorboards. Emma attended meetings, her voice steady as she shared her story. A story of resilience, motherhood, and the unbroken thread that connected past to present. The community's efforts culminated in a legal victory that secured the farmhouse's future, transforming it from a battleground into a sanctuary. In the aftermath, the farmhouse blossomed with renewed life. Emma and Elena settled into a rhythm of quiet joy and purpose. The rooms, once cold and shadowed, now echoed with laughter, music, and the soft murmur of shared stories. The garden, tended by neighbors and friends, flourished under the first warm rays of spring, a living testament to renewal and care. Emma often found herself in the small study Margaret had once used, surrounded by journals and photographs that chronicled generations of women who had shaped this place. She traced their stories with reverence, feeling the weight of legacy and the promise of the future intertwined. The farmhouse became more than a home. It was a beacon for those seeking refuge, strength, and community. Emma opened its doors to expectant mothers, women facing hardship, and anyone in need of a place to belong. The legacy of resilience and hope that Margaret had begun was now a living, breathing force. As spring unfolded into summer, Emma watched Elena take her first steps across the sunlit floorboards, a small smile lighting the child's face. The farmhouse, with its creaks and whispers, seemed to celebrate alongside them, a witness to new beginnings. In quiet moments, Emma reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the depths of fear and uncertainty to the embrace of community and legacy. The discovery of the will was more than a legal victory. It was a restoration of history, a reclaiming of identity, and a testament to the enduring power of family. The farmhouse stood firm, its walls woven with stories of strength and survival. Emma's voice joined the chorus of generations, a guardian of the past and a beacon for the future. With Elena at her side, she faced the horizon with hope, knowing that the legacy she protected would continue to grow. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the garden, bursting with life. Emma stepped outside, the evening air warm against her skin. She held her daughter close, feeling the steady heartbeat beneath her palm, a rhythm that echoed the unbroken line of women who had come before. The farmhouse, once threatened by loss and neglect, was now a sanctuary of resilience and love. Within its walls, the past and future intertwined, and Emma knew that the legacy was safe, carried forward in the hearts of those who lived and loved here. As night fell, the stars emerged, their light a silent promise that the story was far from over. The farmhouse stood steadfast, a symbol of hope and home, ready to embrace whatever chapters lay ahead. The morning sun poured through the tall windows of the farmhouse, bathing the worn wooden floors in a warm, golden light. Emma stood near the doorway, cradling Elena in her arms, her eyes taking in the transformed space that now breathed life and hope. The air was filled with the soft murmur of voices from the gathering in the main room. A circle of women, some expectant mothers, others seeking solace, all drawn here by the sanctuary Emma had nurtured from the shadows of neglect. The farmhouse, once battered by storms and threatened by loss, had blossomed into a haven. Walls that had long stood silent now echoed with laughter, whispered stories, and the quiet strength of shared resilience. Emma moved through the room with gentle purpose, offering smiles and words of encouragement. Her presence a steady beacon amid the fragile hopes of those around her. She thought of Margaret, whose journals she had read so many times, whose courage had kindled the fire that now warmed this place. The legacy of women who had faced hardship and chosen to endure was woven into every corner, every creak of the floorboards. Emma felt the weight and the gift of that inheritance, a responsibility she embraced with quiet determination. The women gathered here came from different walks of life, each carrying their own burdens and fears. Yet within the farmhouse's embrace, they found community, a tapestry of support and understanding that transcended time and circumstance. Emma listened as stories were shared, tears and laughter mingling, the bonds of sisterhood growing stronger with each passing moment. Outside, the garden bloomed with vibrant colors, tended by hands both young and old. It was a living testament to renewal, a symbol of the growth that this place had inspired. Emma often wandered among the flowers, feeling the earth beneath her feet and the promise of new beginnings rising with each sprouting leaf. Her days were filled with purpose, organizing gatherings, nurturing the connections that had formed, and preparing for the future that Elena would inherit. The farmhouse had become more than a home. It was a refuge and a foundation, a place where the past's lessons met the present's challenges with hope and strength. Emma's nights were quieter, spent rocking Elena to sleep by the firelight, the child's soft breaths a soothing rhythm against the backdrop of the farmhouse's enduring heartbeat. In those moments, Emma whispered promises, not just to her daughter, but to the generations who had come before, and those yet to come, that this place would always be a sanctuary. The community's efforts to preserve the farmhouse continue to grow, with neighbors and supporters joining in celebrations and restoration projects. The farmhouse stood as a beacon of resilience, a testament to the power of collective will and the unyielding spirit of motherhood. Emma often reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the storm-lashed nights of uncertainty to the dawn of a new chapter filled with connection and care. The farmhouse's walls held the echoes of every struggle and triumph, every whispered hope and fierce determination. As spring turned to summer, Emma watched Elena take her first tentative steps across the sunlit floor, her laughter ringing out like a promise. The farmhouse, once a place of solitude and struggle, now pulsed with life and possibility. Standing on the porch one evening, Emma gazed out over the moonlit grounds, the cool night air carrying the scent of blooming flowers and fresh earth. The stars scattered across the sky seemed to mirror the flickering lights within the farmhouse, each one a beacon of hope and renewal. She felt the unbroken line of women, Margaret, her mother, her great-grandmother, and now herself and Elena, all connected by threads of strength and love. The legacy was alive, vibrant, and enduring. Emma's heart swelled with a profound sense of belonging. The farmhouse was no longer just a building or a memory. It was home, a sanctuary forged through resilience, community, and the fierce, unyielding power of motherhood. As the night deepened, Emma whispered a silent thank you to the women who had come before, their spirits woven into the very fabric of the place she now called home. With Elena asleep in her arms, she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Rooted in history, surrounded by love, and guided by hope. The farmhouse stood strong beneath the moonlit sky, a testament to endurance and new beginnings, its story forever intertwined with the lives it sheltered. Emma and Elena were no longer alone. They were part of a lineage of women whose strength and courage would carry them through all seasons to come.